we get started, I just want to, talk about like what is rap and hip hop as we discuss and with this and the lyrics today. So rap is something you do and hip hop is something you live. Rapper and hip hop teacher KRS-One said this, and rap is the art form and hip hop is more so the culture. So when we talk about rap and hip hop, it's important to differentiate between the two. You have four elements of hip hop, where it's essential, which are graffiti, DJing, breaking, and rap. But there's other aspects of hip hop culture. So about hip hop culture, we also have to talk about the street fashion, street entrepreneurship, street language, and more. So let's talk about where hip hop kind of started for anybody who doesn't know. So hip hop kind of came about in the post civil rights movement and the post Black Power movement. People liken a lot of hip hop scholars. There's a quote official and unofficial date to the birthplace of hip hop, which is 1520 Sedgwick Avenue in Bronx, New York, which I've visited a few times. On August 11th, 1973, a young Jamaican immigrant DJ named DJ Kool Herc, his sister asked him to DJ for, a local comeback to school party. And with that, they started breakdancing, learned to mix and match and scratch to DJ scratch. He had proteges such as Grandmaster Flash and Africa Bambaataa, and they formed as the fathers of hip hop. In the hip hop, how did it come about? With the breakdancing, with the beatboxing, with the rapping. There's a lot of racial solidarity through socioeconomic factors, what was going on in Bronx, New York at the time, such as the Bronx Cross Express Highway that was, over people's homes. There was landlords who was burning their, apartment complexes in order to get more insurance money. And there was a lot of poverty in these areas between African Americans, immigrants from the Caribbean, Latinx peoples, and the poor whites. And through that, because they couldn't afford to, to go to the studios because they couldn't afford to get the instruments, they started creating the instrument with their mouths. They started creating it with the art on the streets, and that's kind of how hip hop, in a nutshell, became born. So when we talk about the culture, that's what we have to talk about where it started. So one important thing that's going to kind of lead into our conversation today is in which it's like a psychological thing, I'll say. So the commercialization of hip hop is important to think about when you're talking about the as we develop in with hip hop and the law. So you have the biggest earliest hits of hip hop, which is rap is the light, a hip hop, a hip hits a hip hop, you don't stop. Everybody knows that jam. And then you have Blondie with Rapture, and you also have Grandmaster Flash with The Message. Once after the late 70s and early 80s, companies started to, record labels started to say, okay, we should take rap seriously as an art form. And, the Grammys and a lot of people started taking rap as not just this quirky thing, but something should be taken seriously as an art form. We started to commodify it. However, to do sales in terms of marketing, a lot of hip hop in terms of characters, and this is where it gets into kind of, we was talking about the case today, but characters of what rappers represents. Again, rap is the art form, and rap is about storytelling. Rhythm and poetry is what it stands for. So a lot of times, like the psychological part of rap, when record labels are marketing, to, different buyers and everything, they want to make sure, not make sure, but they put intentionally characters that Black people have typically been predicted, how I say, they've been shown as in different forms of media, such as vaudeville and minstrel shows. So you have like archetypes such as the Mandingo, Jezebel, and angry Black women, or Sapphire. And with these characters are able to sell because a majority of those who buy hip hop records are white. So sometimes a lot of stereotypes get filled through the rappers, and not hip hop, but rappers in general, in terms of stories they tell. And then the music videos and a lot of the other parts of rap and hip hop media. So I wanted to talk about another part of this, which is keeping it real versus real hip hop, which is going to be essential to kind of like how rappers tell their stories. So keeping it real comes from, community conversations, reaffirming gender norms and characters within rap performance, and de facto facts of like de facto rules of the Black community, quote unquote, the streets. So some people, when they're talking about raps, about how they feel about, police brutality, how they feel about women, how they feel about different socio-political issues, sometimes they'll be reaffirmed through keeping it real. It'll come from, gender norms. It'll come from, different institutions of like patriarchy and this kind of like male supremacy within their raps, and it'll be like, I'm just keeping it real when I'm saying this. And then also there's a differentiation, but also like a comparison when we talk about what real hip hop is. Real hip hop, there is no such thing as real hip hop because hip hop is not just one linear thing. That's where the ageism slash ageist views can come from in hip hop, because you have rappers today. They don't look like the same rappers in the 70s and 80s that I talked about. They don't look like Sugar Hill Gang. They don't look like Grandmaster Flash. However, they can still, like, we have artists such as, like, Gucci Mane, or you have Future or Freddie Gibbs that tell their stories and their ways through their raps, but they may not be of the respectability of what's considered old hip hop or real hip hop, quote unquote. However, real hip hop doesn't just entail that fake dichotomy, but real hip hop also entails anything that represents the culture in any way, that gives praise to the culture, whether that be the energy, academic analysis by key stakeholders, contributions to the community, revamping the elements such as graffiti, DJing, teaching children, and activism, such as we see with, rappers such as the late Nipsey Hussle, No Name, and individuals that use their hip hop platforms, and such as, Dr. Miles today, that's talking about these issues in a very important way to educate and see how hip hop we can use it better for our community. So one thing that's also important to do is, as we talked about characters in the past, right? One thing I want to talk about is world development and permeation. As you've heard through my bio, I traveled to China, and while I was doing, academia in China, I wanted to call myself doing, I coined it myself, like hip hop archaeology, studying the area, interviewing the people, like, looking at the, looking like artifacts of old Chinese rap artists, and I just see what KRS-One and even other members of hip hop and saying that hip hop is one of the most viral things, to happen across the world. And when people think of hip hop, they think of rap. While I was there, like I told you, I went on tour. This is me at my final tour at the bottom left. And it was a sold out crowd. Right before I took my finals, I had a sold out crowd in, like, Harbin, China. But during that, these people were the Chinese artists. They looked at me as a figure. They looked at, when they did their impression of hip hop, they would dress with chains. They would get reverse perms in their hair. They tried to fit the hip hop aesthetic, which made me question and interview them on, what do you think the hip hop aesthetic is? And how does that relate to the way they view African Americans? How does that relate to the way they view stereotypes about hip hop and rap? And that was part of my research as well. Then even in Europe, if anybody knows about the drill movement started with, Chief Keef, G Herbo, Lil Durk, and many other artists inside of Chicago, Illinois, in America. And that transferred to UK drill, in which they're talking about grime rap, which is about the socio-political issues that go on inside their community, inside of, like, in Black London, Then come to street language and lexicon, which is why I put something in the middle called no cap. Hip hop is a language. Hip hop is a transferring language. We vent out our frustrations through hip hop. We vent out storytelling, political education through artists such as Nasir Jones, And in that, a lot of language gets transferred that sometimes can be misinterpreted by people who don't know things such as African American vernacular English. For example, there was a situation in which there was a Londoner, I think there was a non-Black person of color, I believe, and they had said, this is why African Americans don't have any type of culture unique to them, no cap. They finished their statement with no cap. No cap is typically said by Atlanta natives in Atlanta, Georgia, but a rapper named Takeoff had said it in an interview roughly about like 2 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, I believe. And when he said that, it permeated through Twitter, the catchiness of it did, and it was started to be using in songs and a lot of hip hop songs. And before you know it, people started to use it. So this person that said we have no culture, no cap, they didn't realize they was using a transfer term that was spread throughout rap. So when we're talking about language within rap and hip hop culture, like, what exaggerations and storytelling and narratives, that's very important to understand these dichotomies as we talk about issues of the law and socio-political issues. These are some extended literature that everybody can look up. You have the Hip Hop Wars by Trisha Rose. That actually, like, galvanized me to be the person I am today. Started the AUC Hip Hop Revolution in Atlanta, Georgia. And then you have Race, Lyrics, and Guilt in America, Rap on Trial, where I believe I read the case that we're studying today inside of it that talks about how they use lyrics and music videos to incriminate individuals when sometimes they're storytelling or exaggerations, but their First Amendment rights are being, not respected when they're just doing storytelling. Then you have a lot of books that talk about hip hop, history, business, specific dates, Harvard scholars. That's all down here if anybody wants to get that list later, and we can put that inside the chat. Well, that's pretty much it for me. No, thank you all for having me. I'm still going to be here, to answer any questions, also for the remainder of this panel. But that's just an introduction about rap and hip hop as we get into hip hop and the law.
Thank you so much, Michelangelo.